Well, I hope you enjoyed the exercise. I know it may have been a little difficult for some of you to think of a name for each line, but where this is going to become valuable is that in my own personal time, there's been a guy that I have looked up to who has been a constant giver. He just blesses people, both in giving of time and of their finances. And as you're going to see, we're going to come back to this exercise a little bit later on in the study, but I hope you've enjoyed that, and because it's going to pay some rich dividends as you start to put names in those categories. Now, I want to turn to some things that may hinder us from serving. There are many motivations that cause us to serve, but also some that stop us from serving.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff that can get in the way. And I was thinking back, as we put this together, one of the first few opportunities I had to sort of be part of more of a group thing to serve, people wanted to go to a nursing home. And I think everything inside of me just kind of, something was going on, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but whatever it was at the time, and this was back in my early 20s, a group of people wanted to go do that, and I was reluctant. I felt awkward, and when it finally became, this is the day we're going to do it, I backed down. I mean, I didn't call anybody and say, no, I wasn't coming. It was left a little open-ended. Yeah. It wasn't like a sign-up list and, you'd assigned a specific task to do. But I just kind of got busy and bailed and didn't show.
You weren't MIA.
Yeah,
right? You just kind of slid off your radar.
But and nobody really came back and said why or anything, because it was sort of, hey, if you can make it, do it. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. But when the time came, I didn't. And as we put this together, I started to reflect on what was behind that. There was something going on inside me. And was it just some superficial or external thing? Like I had a grandmother spend many years in a nursing home, and that wasn't a positive experience. Was it that? What was it? But as we talk through this, I think some of these things crept up. For example, and they show up in your life when you think of times that you had an opportunity to serve, but something held you back. And the first one here is disappointment. Sometimes we're disappointed with our church, or maybe with a Christian leader or a pastor, or some friends, or we're disappointed maybe just in general with the way our lives are going. We just, things aren't working out. And that keeps us from wanting to have that giving, sort of serving spirit.
Kind of like you tried.
Yeah.
There's another angle from that too.
Sure, you get disappointed because you showed up maybe at the deal and it didn't turn out the right way, or maybe not everyone showed up, and so they canceled it. And you said, man, I spent all this extra time. I carved out time on Saturday to go help at the soup kitchen, and now we're not going to do it. Or they said it would be this great experience, and it turned out that it was just not good, and it didn't work out, and there weren't, whatever the reason, there's this great disappointment, and you felt that, and you sort of said, you know what, at least inside, I'm not going to do this again.
Another one is very, very common, and it was the one that plagued me, and it's just fear. Emotionally, whenever you have any opportunity, you're going to go to one of two places. You're either going to take a risk and serve God and do it, or you're going to get paralyzed by fear. And the enemy can use this very easily in our lives. I know for me, I didn't have the confidence, and anytime fear came up over me, I just went in a shell. I could just
kind of withdraw with that.
Yeah, I just fell off the radar, and it just didn't do it. But a lot of times people, you just feel like you don't have anything to contribute,
right?
Or you can't. And I think I had this little revelation when I looked at fear. I just looked at the disciples. Notice that God didn't pick the who's who. He didn't pick the elite. He didn't pick the rich and famous. He didn't even pick the most biblically literate, which, as a new follower of Christ, that's where I was feeling like, I don't even know the Word of God. How can I contribute to anything?
Sure.
But he picked people who were willing and obedient. And so fear is another one of these that kind of weaves its way in to stopping you or your group from taking a risk that God wants you to.
Yeah, as you talked about the disciples, I was thinking one of the phrases he had to use over and over, be not afraid. Don't be afraid. And I think it stirred up even in them. There was a situation or whatever, and they said, hey, get past your fear. A third one would be guilt. And we feel guilty sometimes for either not having done enough already or that we're not the right person to do it. Why am I here serving? Will people think that I'm sort of some super Christian when I know in reality I have sin in my life, I struggle, I don't know what I'm doing. And for whatever reason, there's this cloud hangs over me that I shouldn't be here doing this. I don't have the skills or gifts to do it.
Or I have so much sin in my life. How could God use this vessel. I mean, we talk about a broken vessel, but I may have some gaping holes.
Yeah, or even if that's sin, and that's a good point. Sometimes that sin's been confessed and dealt with, but the evil one will sort of whisper again, saying, "Who are you to serve these people? Look what you did last week. Look what happened to you. Or even the last time you tried to do this. Do you want that to happen again?" And the shoulders slump, and you feel guilty. And I see that with a lot of folks. Guilt just seems to be a cloud that hangs over them that keeps them from doing a lot of things, participating in a group, being loving, some of the other things we talked about, but certainly it keeps them from serving.
Yeah. Another one is bitterness. Now, this is one that starts out very innocently, but it can grow and have a pretty deep root.
Yeah, really.
And sometimes you have a bitterness against the church. Something maybe didn't go your way, so I'm not going to serve them. Yeah. Or, it may be a leader that's taking over something, or it may have just been, a place where, you felt you got taken advantage of, or, there can be a number of reasons of how bitterness can creep in.
I think people feel used sometimes. The church will, or an organization, or at work, or whatever, they'll say, here's our motive for doing this, here's what we're going to do, but really they got manipulated into using their abilities or their money or whatever, and they felt taken advantage of, and to your point, that bitterness kind of set in, and now they're worried, is that going to happen again? But it affects every area of life.
Yeah, and it starts to grow in that, and you start to see that the antidote against that is just realizing who you do it for and that you do it for God. But bitterness is one that stops us from saying, hey, I'm going to jump back into the game.
Yep. And last one that we want to mention here is rejection. That sense of I didn't get chosen or picked, or it didn't work out relationally maybe with me. Maybe as they put the teams together where we were serving, I thought for sure I'd get chosen to be part of this because I have a gift of teaching, and I'm sure they would have wanted me to do some teaching, but instead they said, hey, can you organize chairs? And maybe there was disappointment or some other things in there, but the reality is I took it personally. And I feel rejected.
People go back to the playground, where they're picking up teams, and I guess I'll have to take you. And so there's a lot of rejection that pops up.
Absolutely. Another thing I think sometimes, and this has happened to me when I've served, and it works on your heart, is you serve some people, maybe even people who are poor or in need, and they don't seem to, quote, from your perspective, appreciate it.
Yeah.
In other words, you did something and you didn't hear thank you, or you didn't, and you wonder, what's that about? And you feel rejected, even though that's a terrible motivation, but that can happen. There can be this feeling of, I tried to serve, it wasn't received, and that's a way of saying, I don't like you, I don't want you here, and people take that, and then they say, forget that, I'm not doing it again.
Yeah. So here's what we want you to do in your group time, and this is going to be a little bit different, and I know as soon as I said different, a lot of you are like going, I don't like this.
They've been together a few sessions now, they know how to do this.
Yeah, they trust us. We wouldn't do anything
we
else.
wouldn't take them down the path.
But look at this list with me again. When you look at disappointment, when you look at fear, when you look at guilt or bitterness or rejection, what we want you to do is we're going to give you about 20 minutes here. We'd love for you to spend about 10 minutes by yourself.
Kind of on your own,
Yeah, just on your own. No one's going to be looking over your shoulder or anything. And kind of look through each one of these. Is one of them grabbing you? Is one of them touching your heart? Did we strike a nerve with you? Yeah. Is there something that you just want to write down there in your study guide to say, God, I'm going to release this to you. I'm just going to, give it all to you. And we do want you to take some time to do that. And then we're going to give you a little time for those in the group that want to share. Those are the extroverts. They're like going, yeah, I'm ready to share. But, they may want to share with you and share with the group. And you may want to, maybe part of your step out is being able to say, hey, this is what I wrote down. So what I want you to do is just turn right now, just huddle in with yourself and just say a quick prayer and say, hey, God, I'm going into this exercise. It feels painful, but work through it. And just, take about 10 minutes and your leader will pull you out of it. And then just be able to come back as a group. So we'll see you after this break.